Section 8 of State of the Union Addresses by United States Presidents, 1923 to 1932. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Zach Trent, Calvin Coolidge, December 6th, 1927, Part 2. Mussel shoals. The last year has seen considerable changes in the problem of mussel shoals. Development of other methods show that nitrates can probably be produced at less costs by the use of hydroelectric power. Extensive investigation made by the Department of War indicates that the nitrate plants on this project are of little value for national defense and can probably be disposed of within 2 years. The oxidation part of the plants, however, should be retained indefinitely. This leaves this project mostly concerned with power. It should, nevertheless, continue to be dedicated to agriculture. It is probable that this desire can be best served by disposing of the plant and applying the revenues received from it to research for methods of more economical production of concentrated fertilizer and to demonstrations and other methods of stimulating its use on the farm. But in disposing of the property, preference should be given to proposals to use all or part of it for nitrate production and fertilizer manufacturing. Flood control. For many years, the federal government has been building a system of dikes along the Mississippi River for protection against high water. During the past season, the lower states were overcome by a most disastrous flood. Many thousands of square miles were inundated, a great many lives were lost, much livestock was drowned, and a very heavy destruction of property was inflicted upon the inhabitants. The American Red Cross at once went to the relief of the stricken communities. Appeals for contributions have brought in over $17 million. The federal government has provided services, equipment, and supplies, probably amounting to about $7 million more. Between $5 million and $10 million in addition have been provided by local railroads, the states, and their political units. Credits have been arranged by the Farm Loan Board, and 3 emergency finance corporations with a total capital of $3 million have ensured additional resources to the extent of $12 million. Through these means, the 700,000 people in the flooded areas have been adequately supported. Provision has been made to care for those in need until after the 1st of January. The Engineering Corps of the Army has contracted to close all breaks in the dike system before the next season of high water. A most thorough and elaborate survey of the whole situation has been made and embodied in a report with recommendations for future flood control, which will be presented to the Congress. The carrying out of their plans will necessarily extend over a series of years. They will call for a raising and strengthening of the dike system with provision for emergency spillways and improvements for the benefit of navigation. Under the present law, the land adjacent to the dikes has paid 1/3 of the cost of their construction. This has been a most extraordinary concession from the plan adopted in relation to irrigation, where the general rule has been that the land benefited should bear the entire expense. It is true, of course, that the troublesome waters do not originate on the land to be reclaimed, but it is also true that such waters have a right-of-way through that section of the country, and the land there is charged with that easement. It is the land of this region that is to be benefited. To say that it is unable to bear any expense of reclamation is the same thing as saying that it is not worth reclaiming. Because of expenses incurred and charges already held against the land, it seems probable that some revision will have to be made concerning the proportion of cost which it should bear. But it is extremely important that it should pay enough so that those requesting improvements will be charged with some responsibility for their cost. And the neighborhood where works are constructed have a pecuniary interest in preventing waste and extravagance, and securing a wise and economical expenditure of public funds. It is necessary to look upon this emergency as a national disaster. It has been so treated from its inception. Our whole people have provided with great generosity for its relief. Most of the department of the federal government has been engaged in the same effort. The governments of the afflicted areas, both state and municipal, cannot be given too high praise for the courageous and helpful way in which they have come to the rescue of the people. If the sources directly chargeable cannot meet the demand, the national government should not fail to provide generous relief. This, however, does not mean restoration. The government is not an insurer of its citizens against the hazards of the elements. We shall always have flood and drought, heat and cold, earthquake and wind, lightning and tidal wave, which are all too constant in their afflictions. The government does not undertake to reimburse its citizens for loss and damage incurred under such circumstances. It is chargeable, however, with the rebuilding of the public works and the humanitarian duty of relieving its citizens from distress. The people in the flooded area and their representatives have approached this problem in the most generous and broad-minded way. They should be met with a like spirit on the part of the national government. This is all one country. The public needs of each part must be provided for by the public at large. No required relief should be refused. An adequate plan should be adopted to prevent a recurrence of this disaster in order that the people may restore to productivity and comfort their fields and their towns. Legislation by this Congress should be confined to our principal and most pressing problem, the lower Mississippi, considering tributaries only so far as they materially affect the main flood problem. A definite federal program relating to our waterways was proposed when the last Congress authorized a comprehensive survey of all the important streams of the country in order to provide for their improvement, including flood control, navigation, power, and irrigation. Other legislation should wait pending a report on this survey. The recognized needs of the Mississippi should not be made a vehicle for carrying other projects. All proposals for development should stand on their own merits. Any other method would result in ill-advised conclusions, great wastes of money, and instead of promoting, would delay the orderly and certain utilization of our water resources. Very recently, several of the New England states have suffered somewhat similarly from heavy rainfall and high water. No reliable estimate of damage has yet been computed, but it is very large to private and public property. The Red Cross is generously undertaking what is needed for immediate relief, repair, and reconstruction of houses, restocking of domestic animals and food, clothing, and shelter. A considerable sum of money will be available through the regular channels of the Department of Agriculture for reconstruction of highways. It may be necessary to grant special aid for this purpose. Complete reports of what is required will undoubtedly be available early in the session. Inland navigation. The Congress in its last session authorized the general improvements necessary to provide the Mississippi waterway system with better transportation. Stabilization of the levels of the Great Lakes and their opening to the sea by an effective shipway remain to be considered. Since the last session, the Board of Engineers of the War Department has made a report on the proposal for a canal through the state of New York, and the Joint Board of Engineers, representing Canada and the United States, has finished a report on the St. Lawrence River. Both of these boards conclude that the St. Lawrence project is cheaper, affords a more expeditious method of placing Western products in European markets, and will cost less to operate. The State Department has requested the Canadian government to negotiate treaties necessary to provide for this improvement. It will be necessary to secure an agreement with Canada to put in works necessary to prevent fluctuation in the levels of the Great Lakes. Legislation is desirable for the construction of a dam at Boulder Canyon on the Colorado River, primarily as a method of flood control and irrigation. A secondary result would be a considerable power development and a source of domestic water supply for Southern California. Flood control is clearly a national problem, and water supply is a government problem. But every other possibility should be exhausted before the federal government becomes engaged in the power business. The states which are interested ought to reach mutual agreement. This project is in reality their work. If they wish the federal government to undertake it, they should not hesitate to make the necessary concessions to each other. This subject is fully discussed in the annual report of the Secretary of the Interior. The Columbia River Basin project is being studied and will be one to be considered at some future time. The Inland Waterways Corporation is proving successful and especially beneficial to agriculture. A survey is being made to determine its future needs. It has never been contemplated that if inland rivers were open to navigation, it would then be necessary for the federal government to provide the navigation. Such a request is very nearly the equivalent of a declaration that their navigation is not profitable, that the commodities which they are to carry can be taken at a cheaper rate by some other method, in which case the hundreds of millions of dollars proposed to be expended for opening rivers to navigation would not only be wasted, but would entail further constant expenditures to carry the commodities of private persons for less than cost. The policy is well established that the government should open public highways on land and on water, but for the use of the public in their private capacity. It has put on some demonstration barge lines, but always with the expectation that if they prove profitable, they would pass into private hands, and if they do not prove profitable, they will be withdrawn. The problems of transportation over inland waterways should be taken up by private enterprise so that the public will have the advantage of competition and service. It is expected that some of our lines can be sold, some more demonstration work done, and that with the completion of the Ohio project, a policy of private operation can be fully developed. Prohibition. After more than 2 generations of constant debate, our country adopted a system of national prohibition under all the solemnities involved in an amendment to the federal Constitution. In obedience to this mandate, the Congress and the states, with 1 or 2 notable exceptions, have passed required laws for its administration and enforcement. This imposes upon the citizenship of the country, and especially on all public officers, not only the duty to enforce, but the obligation to observe the sanctions of this constitutional provision and its resulting laws. If this condition could be secured, all question concerning prohibition would cease. The federal government is making every effort to accomplish these results through careful organization, large appropriations, and administrative effort. Smuggling has been greatly cut down, the larger sources of supply for illegal sale have been checked, and by means of injunction and criminal prosecution, the process of enforcement is being applied. The same vigilance on the part of local governments would render these efforts much more successful. The federal authorities propose to discharge their obligation for enforcement to the full extent of their ability. The Negro. History does not anywhere record so much progress made in the same length of time as that which has been accomplished by the Negro race in the United States since the Emancipation Proclamation. They have come up from slavery to be prominent in education, the professions, art, science, agriculture, banking, and commerce. It is estimated that 50,000 of them are on the government payrolls, drawing about $50 million each year. They have been the recipients of presidential appointments, and their professional ability has arisen to sufficiently high plane so that they have been entrusted with the entire management and control of the great Veterans Hospital at Tuskegee, where their conduct has taken high rank. They have shown that they have been worthy of all the encouragement which they have received. Nevertheless, they are too often subjected to thoughtless and inconsiderate treatment, unworthy alike of the white or colored races. They have especially been made the target of the foul crime of lynching. For several years, these acts of unlawful violence had been diminishing. In the last year, they have shown an increase. Every principle of order and law and liberty is opposed to this crime. The Congress should enact any legislation it can under the Constitution to provide for its elimination. American Indian. The condition of the American Indian has much improved in recent years. Full citizenship was bestowed upon them on June 2, 1924, and appropriations for their care and advancement have been increased. Still, there remains much to be done. Notable increases in appropriations for the several major functions performed by the Department of the Interior on behalf of the Indians have marked the last 5 years. In that time, successive annual increases in appropriations for their education total $1,804,325 for medical care, $578,000 for industrial advancement, $205,000 or $2,582,325 more than would have been spent in the same period on the basis of appropriations for 1923 and the preceding years. The needs along health, educational, industrial, and social lines, however, are great, and the budget estimates for 1929 include still further increases for Indian administration. To advance the time when the Indians may become self-sustaining, it is my belief that the federal government should continue to improve the facilities for their care and as rapidly as possible turn its responsibility over to the states. Coal. Legislation authorizing a system of fuel administration and the appointment by the President of a board of mediation and conciliation in case of actual or threatened interruption of production is needed. The miners themselves are now seeking information and action from the government, which could readily be secured through such a board. It is believed that a thorough investigation and reconsideration of this proposed policy by the Congress will demonstrate that this recommendation is sound and should be adopted. Petroleum conservation. The national government is undertaking to join in the formation of a cooperative committee of lawyers, engineers, and public officers to consider what legislation by the states or by the Congress can be adopted for the preservation and conservation of our supply of petroleum. This has come to be one of the main dependencies for transportation and power so necessary to our agriculture and industrial life. It is expected the report of this committee will be available for later congressional action. Meantime, the requirement that the Secretary of the Interior should make certain leases of land belonging to the Osage Indians in accordance with the Act of March 3, 1921, should be repealed. The authority to lease should be discretionary in order that the property of the Indians not be wasted and the public suffer a future lack of supply. Alien property. Under treaty, the property held by the alien property custodian was to be retained until suitable provision had been made for the satisfaction of American claims, while still protecting the American claimants in order to afford every possible accommodation to the nationals of the countries whose property was held. The Congress has made liberal provision for the return of a larger part of the property. All trusts under $10,000 were returned in full, and partial returns were made on the others. The total returned was approximately $350 million. There is still retained, however, about $250 million. The Mixed Claims Commission has made such progress in the adjudication of claims that legislation can now be enacted providing for the return of the property, which should be done under conditions which will protect our government and our claimants. Such a measure will be proposed, and I recommend its enactment. Railroad consolidation. In order to increase the efficiency of transportation and decrease its cost to the shipper, railroad consolidation must be secured. Legislation is needed to simplify the necessary procedure to secure such agreements and arrangements for consolidation, always under the control and with the approval of the Interstate Commerce Commission. Pending this, no adequate or permanent reorganization can be made of the freight rate structure. Meantime, both agriculture and industry are compelled to wait for needed relief. This is purely a business question, which should be stripped of all local and partisan bias and decided on broad principles and its merits in order to promote the public welfare. A large amount of new construction and equipment, which will furnish employment for labor and markets for commodities of both factory and farm, wait on the decision of this important question. Delay is holding back the progress of our country. Many of the same arguments are applicable to the consolidation of the Washington traction companies. Veterans. The care which this country has lavished on its veterans is known of all men. The yearly outlay for this purpose is about $750 million, or about the cost of running the federal government, outside of the Post Office Department, before the World War. The Congress will have before its recommendations of the American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and other like organizations, which should receive candid consideration. We should continue to foster our system of compensation and rehabilitation and provide hospitals and insurance. The magnitude of the undertaking is already so large that all requests calling for further expenditure should have the most searching scrutiny. Our present system of pensions is already sufficiently liberal. It was increased by the last Congress for Civil and Spanish War veterans and widows and for some dependents. It has been suggested that the various governmental agencies now dealing with veterans relief be consolidated. This would bring many advantages. It is recommended that the proper committees of the Congress make a thorough survey of this subject in order to determine if legislation to secure such consolidation is desirable. Education. For many years, it has been the policy of the federal government to encourage and foster the cause of education. Large sums of money are annually appropriated to carry on vocational training. Many millions go into agricultural schools. The general subject is under the immediate direction of a commissioner of education. While this subject is strictly a state and local function, it should continue to have the encouragement of the national government. I am still of the opinion that much good could be accomplished through the establishment of a Department of Education and Relief, into which would be gathered all of these functions under one directing member of the Cabinet. Department of Labor. Industrial relations have never been more peaceful. In recent months, they have suffered from only one serious controversy. In all other difficulties have been adjusted. Both management and labor wishing to settle controversies by friendly agreement rather than by compulsion. The welfare of women and children is being especially guarded by our Department of Labor. Its Children's Bureau is in cooperation with 26 state boards and 80 juvenile courts. Through its Bureau of Immigration, it has been found that medical examination abroad has saved prospective immigrants from much hardship. Some further legislation to provide for reuniting families when either the husband or the wife is in this country and granting more freedom for the migration of the North American Indian tribes is desirable. The United States Employment Service has enabled about 2 million men and women to gain paying positions in the last fiscal year. Particular attention has been given to assisting men past middle life and in providing field labor for harvesting agricultural crops. This has been made possible in part through the service of the Federal Board for Vocational Education, which is cooperating with the states in a program to increase the technical knowledge and skill of the wage earner. Public buildings. Construction is underway in the country and ground has been broken for carrying out a public building program for Washington. We have reached a time when not only the conveniences but the architectural beauty of the public buildings of the capital city should be given much attention. It will be necessary to purchase further land and provide the required continuing appropriations. Historical celebrations. Provision is being made to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the birth of George Washington. Suggestion has been made for the construction of a memorial road leading from the Capitol to Mount Vernon, which may well have the consideration of the Congress, and the commission entrusted with preparations for the celebration will undoubtedly recommend publication of the complete writings of Washington and a series of writings by different authors relating to him. February 25th, 1929, is the 150th anniversary of the capture of Fort Sackville at Vincennes in the state of Indiana. This eventually brought into the Union what was known as the Northwest Territory, embracing the region north of the Ohio River between the Alleghenies and the Mississippi River. This expedition was led by George Rogers Clark. His heroic character and the importance of his victory are too little known and understood. They gave us not only this Northwest Territory, but by means of that, the prospect of reaching the Pacific. The state of Indiana is proposing to dedicate the site of Fort Sackville as a national shrine. The federal government may well make some provisions for the erection under its own management of a fitting memorial at that point. Foreign relations. It is the policy of the United States to promote peace. We are a peaceful people and committed to the settling of disputes by amicable adjustment rather than by force. We have believed that peace can best be secured by a faithful observance on our part of the principles of international law, accompanied by patience and conciliation, and requiring of others a like treatment for ourselves. We have lately had some difference with Mexico relative to the injuries inflicted upon our nationals and their property within that country. A firm adherence to our rights and a scrupulous respect for the sovereignty of Mexico, both in accordance with the law of nations, coupled with patience and forbearance, it is hoped will resolve all our differences without interfering with the friendly relationship between the two governments. We have been compelled to send naval and marine forces to China to protect the lives and property of our citizens. Fortunately, their simple presence there has been sufficient to prevent any material loss of life, but there has been considerable loss of property. That unhappy country is torn by factions and revolutions which bid fair to last for an indefinite period. Meanwhile, we are protecting our citizens and stand ready to cooperate with any government which may emerge in promoting the welfare of the people of China. They have always had our friendship, and they should especially merit our consideration in these days of their distraction and distress. We were confronted by similar condition on a small scale in Nicaragua. Our marine and naval forces protected our citizens and their property and prevented a heavy sacrifice of life and the destruction of that country by a reversion to a state of revolution. Henry L. Stimson, former Secretary of War, was sent there to cooperate with our diplomatic and military officers in effecting a settlement between the contending parties. This was done on the assurance that we would cooperate in restoring a state of peace where our rights would be protected by giving our assistance in the conduct of the next presidential election, which occurs in a few months. With this assurance, the population returned to their peacetime pursuits, with the exception of some small roving bands of outlaws. In general, our relations with other countries can be said to have improved within the year. While having a due regard for our own affairs, the protection of our own rights, and the advancement of our own people, we can afford to be liberal toward others. Our example has become of great importance in the world. It is recognized that we are independent, detached, and do take a disinterested position in relation to international affairs. Our charity embraces the earth, our trade is far flung, Our financial favors are widespread. Those who are peaceful and law-abiding realize that not only have they nothing to fear from us, but that they can rely on our moral support. Proposals for promoting the peace of the world will have careful consideration. But we are not a people who are always seeking for a sign. We know that peace comes from honesty and fair dealing, from moderation, and a generous regard for the rights of others. The heart of the nation is more important than treaties. A spirit of generous consideration is a more certain defense than great armaments. We should continue to promote peace by our example and fortify it by such international covenants against war as we are permitted under our Constitution to make. American progress. Our country has made much progress, but it has taken and will continue to take much effort. Competition will be keen. The temptation to selfishness and arrogance will be severe. The provocations to deal harshly with weaker peoples will be many. All of these are embraced in the opportunity for true greatness. They will be overbalanced by cooperation, by generosity, and a spirit of neighborly kindness. The forces of the universe are taking humanity in that direction. In doing good, in walking humbly, in sustaining its own people, in ministering to other nations, America will work out its own mighty destiny. End of section 8, narrated by Zach Trent.